Hey, Queens, and welcome to the Q Chat, the official podcast of Go Queen, where we have real conversations to inspire healing, growth, and purpose. I'm your host, Shronda Armstrong, founder of Go Queen magazine. Through my work, I help women develop purpose-driven brands that align with their truth, their voice, and their vision. Whether it's through media, branding, or storytelling, I'm all about helping queens shine unapologetically. Here on the Q Chat, we talk about all things self-love, mental health, entrepreneurship, and what it means to walk boldly in your purpose. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'm always here to remind you to go love yourself. In this episode, I'm joined by Telesa Wright, luxury certified real estate broker, certified elevation coach, and award-winning author of Look Back for What. She shares her powerful journey of healing, releasing shame, and helping women reclaim their identity through her national movement, Patio Conversations. This is a real and inspiring conversation about purpose, transformation, and choosing to heal out loud.
She's a queen about her business, working hard on a mission. Head high, purpose driven, crown on, never tilted, go queen. She's a queen about her business, working hard on a mission. Head high, purpose driven, crown on, never tilted, go queen, go queen.
Thank you guys for joining another episode of the Q Chat. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Miss Telesa Wright, and she is an author and a real estate mogul. She's an elevation coach. She does so much for the community in Memphis, Tennessee. And we're going to talk about self-love, of course, her journey, and we're definitely going to dive into her book, which is called Look Back for What. And we're also going to talk about something important about how we can honor the little girls that we used to be. So we're just going to have a nice conversation and, of course, chop it up about our favorite topic on the platform, which is self-love. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for asking. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And thank you. Awesome. And I'm excited to have you. Thank you so much for being on the platform. I wanted to start off by asking you about the book, of course, Look Back for What. And we'll, of course, talk about your upbringing and your beginnings. But I wanted to start off initially about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Girl, honestly, I started writing it kind of like a journal. Like it wasn't meant to be a book. It wasn't meant to even share. It started out as me trying to heal me, and so um the title came because I decided I'm like, the only way I'm going to get better, the only way I'm going to move forward is if I look back and see where all of this came from, where these insecurities developed, when I became just kind of a walking ball of trauma. When did this happen? So that I can address that, as you said, like the little girl, so that I can help the little girl, so that I can be the woman that I felt like I was designed to be. So that's kind of the inspiration behind it, is just for me personally to heal. But I think that once I got into it, I realized that it was bigger than me. That there were many women that were, kind of in the same shoes, that were going through broken relationships, that were having issues with their children and, and their friends and family. And it's hard to admit for sometimes, but sometimes it's not them. It's us, dealing with things from a broken place, and we assume that there are no good men, when in fact they're just triggering, you know. It's not the men. We need healing. We raise our children in trauma. We're scared that they're going to go through things that we went through, and we don't even realize why we respond the way we respond to the things until we start to look back. So yeah, I just realized it was bigger than me, and then decided to keep writing it. It took 9 years because, again, every time I thought I was healed, started writing about something. I had to heal all over again. I was still, dealing with things that I thought that were done and over with, but it was a process, but it's just raw, real, and authentic. It's all of me. I tell people before they read it, make sure you're ready because it'll tear down the image that you or the
Mm.
ideals that you built around me and who I am and what I do and why I do it. And you read that book. So that's why it was scary.
Wow.
Yeah.
You touched on a lot though, how you mentioned just when you go through trauma, and I definitely understand raising your children in fear, raising them from the lens of trauma, just just a lot of things when we go through trauma, how we'll be broken pieces. And one of the things I think when you're on a journey of healing is the hard reality that it's not always the other person. And that doesn't necessarily mean, let's say the person on the other end has wronged you, it doesn't take away from that, but it is our responsibility on how we navigate through those things. And it's kind of an unfair task in a sense because some of us have gone through things that we didn't obviously ask to go through, especially at times in our lives where we weren't able, to defend ourselves.
That's
So
right.
there's that piece, but when we realize that we deserve better, that's when you have to start going through all the pain that you went through and just realizing, okay, I still want to be a better me. So even if the next person is wrong or even if this situation is unfair, I want to figure out a way where I can get through this, so you don't lower yourself. So I definitely understand where that's coming from. If you don't mind, would you like to share just how your upbringing was? Because again, I just feel like, as adults, especially as adult women, when we start growing and evolving and just seeing ourselves, especially once we hit past age 40, we just start to
Yes.
look at ourselves and just see what we can fix, what we can do better, as I said, just to really make that little girl proud. And when we start looking through our lives, and everything really does go back to the core, the origin, our childhood. So, can you give us some background just on your upbringing and how was your childhood?
I was just saying today, to one of my friends that I can't even really say I had a childhood per se, which is the reason why I am bent on not working until I'm 60. I'm going to retire early because I have been working my entire life. And so the moment I could get a job, I was getting a job. Before I could get a job, I was doing little things here and there to try to make ends meet. But I grew up with a single mom. My dad was married. So that was a very stressful situation because obviously there was nothing I can do to control being born into a situation like that. But my family was very religious, which in turn, it kinda made me kind of an abomination to the family. I say kinda because that's just perspective. I don't look at myself like an abomination, but that's kind of, Pentecostal background. It's like you I wasn't supposed to be here. And so, because again, my dad was married and he was older. My mom was only 13 when she got pregnant with me. And in this day and time, if a 20-some-year-old man get a 13 some, it's his fault. But in that day and time, it was her fault. And so she had me and I just brought a lot of stress, which is the reason why I stand on that scripture, that talks where, the prayer of Jabez is one of my favorite scriptures, and I know it's a weird one. I didn't always share this, but his name meant pain. And when I heard the story of it, I said, "Gosh, that's me. I am
Mm,
pain. I caused pain to my stepmom. I caused pain to my mom, my grandma having to deal with a teen mother, my dad. Everybody's reminded, my family is reminded of something that wasn't supposed to happen when they see me. But I say, God, oh, that you would bless me, that you would enlarge my territory, that you would make me great. I don't know if I deserve it, but this is my request. So I heard that prayer and I pray that prayer over my life almost every day from the moment I heard it. Because my life wasn't easy. I was like, I knew that I caused pain. I could tell when I'm in the environment. You could feel the energy that I made things uncomfortable. Everybody went to church together. Both of my
mm,
grandmothers, both of my parents, my stepmom and my aunties, both sides of my family were in this church. So I used to have these recurring dreams over and over, and I didn't know what it meant until I was an adult, but I had these dreams when I was a kid, and I would always be sitting in this green car, and everybody would be passing the car, but I was in the back seat. I was dead, and I had drowned, and nobody noticed. I didn't had no idea what that meant at the time, but it was just constant. I had the dream all the time, and I knew what it meant. As an adult, I'm like, I was drowning in my daily. As a child, I had concerns that the average child wouldn't have. And nobody saw me. Nobody saw me. I was just kind of there, the hustle and bustle. It would be like Easter Sunday where everybody would be at church, but nobody noticed that I was dead. And in a
Mm,
physical sense, I wasn't dead, but I really was dead on the inside because I was a troubled little child. Like I had worries and concerns, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be here. And so my mom was single and she was trying to raise us, but she was also manic depressive. So she really couldn't get out of the bed a lot of days. So I had to take care of my siblings and myself. So I always say that when people say, girl, you are an old lady. I'm like, I've been old for a long time. And I was raised by grandmothers, like, well, my mom's mom, for the most part, is where I would find my safety. It wasn't perfect, but I would know that she was there whenever she was in the same place my whole life. She never moved around like I did. Like me and my mom did. We moved every 6 months. If it wasn't 3 months, because sometimes we get kicked out before the 6 months were up, but I was used to 6 months. And that's what I
mm,
mean by things following you in your life. I got married and my husband's like, why do you always want to move? And I didn't even think about that. Like, it's not like I want to move, but I'm
mm,
trained to move. So there's a lease up. It's time to go. And he's like, why do we have to go? I don't know. The lease is up. He said, but we can
mm,
resign. He grew up in the same house his entire life. So he was completely different from me. He's like, why do we have to move? He didn't understand me. And I really didn't understand him either. That's why our book is called Worth It, because we had to come together, and he was a healing point for me because he asked me questions nobody ever asked me. He noticed things that nobody noticed, and he had the patience of Job, which you'd
mm,
had to be with me, especially in the beginning. So that's
mm.
why I said we have to look back to figure out why we do what we do, because my husband has some really, really good questions. And sometimes I would get upset about those questions because I didn't know the answer. But when I started searching
Yeah.
myself, I could I could identify it. It's like, for an example, I'm washing dishes, minding my business, and my husband walks up behind me and he lovingly reaches for me. And I turn around and I just start yelling at him like, I mean, really, I know I probably traumatized him. And
Yeah.
he said, what happened? What did I do? And I said, You made me mad." He said, "I see that, but I'm trying to understand why I made you mad." And it was a good question, but I didn't know the answer to it. So then I go in my room and I'm crying because I'm so upset. And I ask God, "Why am I responding like that? Why did I get so upset?" And turns out the more searched myself, I realized it's like I didn't feel in control. I felt like a little child who was being touched against her will and didn't have any control over it. But instead of responding like I would have as a child and been quiet, I responded as a child and an adult. No, like, why am I yelling at him for doing what a loving husband does? It's because he caught me off guard. It wasn't the touch. It wasn't him. It was the off guard and the feeling lack of control. And so then we
Mm,
came up with a plan and he said, um, well, I'll announce myself. And that worked for years, and then before you knew it, he didn't need to announce himself. But a lot of times people won't have that type of patience with you. They just say you're crazy and they're
right.
out. So, but him, he asked the right questions and make me ask myself the right questions. And then we came up with a resolve, and years later, it's not an issue.
Right.
But yeah, so
Do you think that an experience too? And I know like that's part of generational curses. And I know like times were different back then. And unfortunately, honestly a common tale of young women, young babies becoming mothers by older adult males, especially because I grew up in a religious background too. That's an unfortunate, like taboo, unspoken subject that has taken place. Do you think like you carried a lot of that generational trauma? Cause I mean, if we're looking at it now in 2025, like she was assaulted basically. So like, do you think you carried that trauma? And back then, our parents didn't get therapy or counseling or anything like that. So, and as you said, she dealt with a lot of mental stress. So, can you imagine, like, she was dealing with untreated trauma. So, do you think you internally carried that over? Because I know you already had to unfortunately deal with just the stigma already with your conception. But do you think you maybe subconsciously carried her pain?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Oh my gosh. When I was a child, I feel like it was unfair to me how much of her pain I carried. And I have felt responsible and accountable for her. There's a lot of things I missed out on because I felt like if I came back, she may not, because she was severely depressed. I would walk in the door sometimes from school and she would be in the room. And as I was talking to her when I was ready to release my book, because I didn't want my book to catch her off guard. And I asked her, was she ready before I put it out there? And she said, of course, she said, I hate that you even noticed a lot of that. She said, but it ain't you're not lying. So if that's what you need to do for you, go ahead, and it's going to help people. And I told her that one day she'll get a chance to tell her story.
Yeah.
She had been raped by him when she was a child, you know, too many times to kn so she couldn't defend herself, but she was going to defend me with her life, um, and so my mom was just, like, severely depressed, and I carried that. I went to school weighted, I went to school, sad for her, and then she'd always be in these relationships where men were fighting her, so even at school, kids thought that I was scared and quiet, but I was fighting grown men at home, honey. I did not have time to be dealing with no little child. I already knew I could, because I had plenty of practice with adults. So, my mom definitely raised me in her trauma. And I realized that I was nothing like my mom in a sense. But as my book discloses, I was a lot like her in a lot of ways with my children. I didn't want my kids to get, touched. So I was with my kids can talk to me. So they told me you're a helicopter parent. And I was like, what in the world is a helicopter parent? They're like, Mama, you're always there. You're like always like right there. And I said, "It's better than the alternative." Nobody was there for me. Nobody was there for any events. Nobody was there to protect me, so I will protect y'all with my life. And so but that was trauma, and those kids were tired of it. They like, "We wanna go spend a night with somebody," and I'm like, "Not on my watch." If y'all wanna spend a night
Yeah.
with somebody, bring them over here, so then we can know the environment. But I do believe that, whether it's in our souls or whether it's in our spirit or if it's just, in our natural lives, we pass those things down and we have to acknowledge it. I told my kids, each one of them, I apologize for this in particular that I'm aware of. I apologize for being passive aggressive about your clothes, I apologize for my daughter, for instance, I had my daughter I was pregnant at 13, had my daughter at 14. My mom was so dependent on men that they didn't have to have anything. She just wanted a man. My daughter was nice enough to buy her
Mm.
boyfriend a ticket to a game, and it triggered me. And I went off and I said, do you want to be like your grandma, like the women in this family where you take care of men? And I was just so upset, and I had to go back and I told her, I said, you tried to do something nice, and it triggered me because I remembered my mom buying a man's shoes and we didn't have school clothes. And I didn't understand it. And so there are these little things that happen in our life and it just triggers us and we're not even aware. And we think that we went out for a good reason. There was absolutely no reason under the sun where I should have yelled at my daughter like that and made her feel like she was less than because she thought she was doing a good deed. She's a teenager. She It's not somebody she was planning on marrying. He was broke. That's what teenagers are, you know? So there's just a lot that, I could go on and on about the things that I did. I would have
Right.
never, like in my book, I would have never left my kid behind because I feel like at 8 years old, 9 years old, you should be helping your kids pick their clothes out, especially if you're not going to take them with you because of what they're wearing. My mom chose to leave me behind and I had my first panic attack because I couldn't get my clothes right, so then that's what I was telling people. That's where the perfectionist came from. I had to dig deep and figure out, why am I like this? Why do I change clothes 57 times? And I started to do that this morning. I said, no, Talisa, you're not doing this. Because I've gained so much weight, the cortisol because of things. And so I put on 57 outfits and still not feel comfortable in my skin. And I say, you're not doing this. Put an outfit on and go out that door. But for the longest over years, I changed so many times because I never felt like I looked good enough. But then I realized, I said, it is all goes back to me not looking good enough to go with my mom, to go with my grandma, for them saying, "You just stay here." Now for my kids,
Yeah.
what that looked like was me saying to them, "Are you gonna wear that? I'm not gonna leave them behind, but I'm going to make them feel a way about the outfit." But I did too good of a job with my children though, because they'll say something like real responses. Yes. My daughter said to me when she had on all those different patterns, I'm comfortable and I like myself in this. So yes, I'm gonna wear this and go on about her business. Me, I would have went changed if somebody said that to me. And my son, why should I be uncomfortable in my space for other people? That's his response to me. And I thought, I guess that's a good question. And I left him be. And my older son was getting a gazillion awards. And one day, all I could think about is, why does this kid have on cargo pants and everybody else have on black and white? He's wearing cargo pants. I even took the suit to try to convince him. He was like, but why do I care? He's getting most likely to succeed, most likely to be president, top of his class. He's getting all these awards, and I couldn't even focus in on the awards. All I saw was him going up there in those cargo pants every time they call his name.
Mm.
And so
Right.
that was my trauma, worried about what other people would think of my kids and what they would think of me because of how my kids are dressed. Passed on. And so now
Mm.
I'm like, no, they need to be free. If that's what they're comfortable with, I need to accept that. As long as they're clean and, not hurting anybody, so what if their patterns don't go together? So it's
Right.
little things, but we also traumatize our children, you know,
Yeah.
just in it's just a different way. My kids are just built better than me
Mhm.
though when I was a child, you know.
Right. And I wanted to ask you too, and I like how you said your children were built better than you, which, is the case with all of our kids, thank God. But as you said, like we carry that trauma and as parents, we'll be like, I'm not going to do the same things, but we'll do it, like you said, in another way of fashion. And it's still unfair, like when you carry those generational curses, because it causes you're not allowed to just enjoy being a parent. I feel like the average person, because you have this stress and you're feeling like all these bad things that aren't happening can happen to your kids. So you just have this extra amount of fear, so you're raising your children through fear.
Yes.
And it's so much stress and anxiety, and you pass that stress and anxiety to your children, and then you're already trying to make yourself whole and unpack the past, and then
Yes.
not pass trauma to your children. And then you realize you passed trauma to your children, but as you said, just in a different uniform. So that's how generational trauma works. Like we may not do the exact same thing that the people ahead of us did, behind us did, but we'll still do it in another way. So that's unfortunate. part of generational curses. But I want to ask you as well. I know you mentioned, just going back to something you mentioned with your husband about, not renewing leases and moving a lot. And ironically, you also work in real estate. So is that something that you think led you to your career? Because when you said that, I'm like, wow, and you work in real estate. So is that just something that you may get some fulfillment out of by placing people in homes and things like that? Like, how did you get into your real estate journey?
Like I said, it's not really fancy. I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband was a realtor. His
Hey, Queen, if you're loving this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or leave a comment, and make sure you share this episode with another queen who needs to hear it. And don't forget, if you're ready to build a purpose driven brand, or if you want to get featured in Go Queen magazine, head over to www.goqueen.com and let's connect. Now let's get back to this episode.
he comes from um a line, so it was just kind of natural for him to be in real estate. And I was a stay-at-home mom and I was just, helping him. I told him I was his free secretary, but I enjoyed doing it because it was something other than dealing with the kids. But girl, I got into real estate because he asked me to go on this one trip with him. He says in California, it was very common for the moms to be at home and the men, because it was just so expensive to have other people take care of your children. Very expensive. So it just made sense for one parent to be at home. And in California, that could be the dad. Whoever's making the most money is the one that would go make the money. And so Benjamin was showing a house to this couple, and he says, "I don't understand what's happening, babe." He said, "You have a good read on people. Can you go with me on this appointment to see what I'm missing? Because I leave the appointment, they want to make an offer, and then by the time I get to the car good, he's calling and saying, 'This one isn't it.' I'm not sure what's happening." So I go with him, and it doesn't take me any time to figure out that he's selling the house to the wrong person. I said, "Do you buy houses? You may pay for them, but you're not actually buying anything. If that house doesn't work for me and these children, that house is not gonna be lived in. You have to look at it this way for them. She doesn't have any money and she is not on that pre-approval letter, but she's the one with the power and you're selling him. So he says yes, and she gets in the car and says it's not working. So that's what's happening. You got to figure out what's important to her. And I said, I can tell you within like 10 minutes what's important to her. She wants to be able to look out the window and see her children playing while she's doing whatever she's doing in the kitchen. She wants a bedroom space that's big enough for her to sleep in there and relax a little bit. And she want an open space. Like she doesn't care about the secondary bedrooms or any of that. She doesn't care about the value going up, which is my husband. He would think like that. She doesn't care about the potential investment. She just cares about her being able to function in this house. And so he changed what he was doing and he directed it towards her and he sold her my house right away. And so then he started saying, "Can you go with me on these?" Now I got another couple. I said, so then me and my boys would go to the Starbucks was right next to his office. We would go to Starbucks and we went by the office and his broker said, pull me to the side and said, "Telesa, you need to get your real estate license because you're selling real estate and you're going to get us sued." And I said, "I'm not selling real estate. I just go with him." She said, "Honey, you're selling real estate and you're really good at it. Just get your license."
Mm.
And so I thought, and baby said, "You really should get your license." So I took the test, passed the first time, and I didn't think I was going to sell real estate, just got the license and realized I really was good at it. So I kind of fell
Mm.
into real estate. And it's funny you said that though, because I love interior design and decorating and houses and floor plans and things like that. So I do get to live vicariously through my people. So I don't have to be moving around my furniture. That's why I got into interior design, because my mother-in-law said, "T, maybe you should consider doing interior decorating so you can stop changing your house out so much." Because every time she came there, I was either switching out couches, but I was just always switching up. It was just, and all of that was because I was used to change and my brain couldn't
Mhm.
operate properly without changing things. So I started decorating and that fulfilled that I could change other people's spaces. So I do feel like that's one of the reasons why I'm really good at it is because I like the movement, the constant movement. I buy houses with my clients. That's what I tell them when they say, "I guess this will do." No, it won't because we're not buying the biggest. We're not going to buy the biggest purchase you'll ever make. With it'll do. We're buying this house together, so I'm not selling you anything. I'm buying it with you. So we all. I got my client found a house yesterday that's been looking for a while, and baby, we were celebrating together like we moving in together, right? Because I do feel like, oh, it's another house. Apologies. I thought that's one of the hardest things I think I had to go through is accepting an apology that was never given, so that I could
Mm,
grow. Because some people, and that's what this
right.
generation does get right. Our generation, I think, not all of us, but
Mm,
a lot of us get it right because sometimes the healing doesn't take anything but an apology. Acknowledgement will do wonders for people. And so that's the one thing we
mm,
can do is tell our children, I'm sorry when we realize something. Our parents, I'm gonna say the generation, that is not
yeah.
their strong suit. They will tell
Yeah.
you that didn't even happen. It's like, "Yes, it did. I was there. I've been living it ever since it happened that day, so I haven't let it die long enough for me to forget that it happened." So I think that this generation, at least we're in a place to where we're trying to heal, and I think they would've if they could've, but they put it all on Jesus. Whatever they needed, I'm like, "Jesus made the therapist, honey, go get one, please. Please." So, yeah, that's what I want to say about that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is the generations that raised us. There are no apologies. And a lot of times, and I think that's why a lot of people of our current generation are really on a healing journey. And you have so many women our ages who are life coaches and motivational speakers because we grew up in a generation where you can't even tell the people in your family something that happened because they're gonna swear up and down it never even took place when you know it happened. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's a frustration already that I think a lot of us have carried, and, of course, we wanna talk about the religious part, like, a lot of our generation were raised and I'm not saying everyone, but the most average person I feel like our age was raised under religious
yeah,
households, and that's just, how our parents and parents before then were raised. Oh, Jesus will fix it. Just pray on it.
yeah.
You're not depressed. There's no such thing as depression. If you are depressed, that means that something's lacking in your prayer life. Like you
It's
don't go
the
to
devil.
church enough. Like everything, religion is weaponized, basically. So, like, if you have any type of depression or if you're trying to deal with trauma, if you're even speaking up, because we know we grew up in that generation, what happens in this house stays in this house. But
Yeah,
as you said, it goes to the next level where it's like, it didn't happen. So
yeah,
just to wash it away, and if it did, you should be getting over it.
yeah,
So, we grew up in that way. If you start even speaking up about it, you're the pariah, there's something wrong with you, like, you're not serving God correctly, like, you're not supposed to be speaking on these things. I just saw a post last week by a pretty prominent pastor, and he had, like, a whole list of different things that shouldn't take place in a family, and one of the things that he listed, which kinda surprised me, was like, "Well, family secret's supposed to stay in the family," and I was like, "Ooh, like, that's not a healthy thing for,
no,
a person in that position to say, because what if that family secret is abuse or molestation or so many things that people have dealt with within their family?" No, that doesn't need to stay within the family.
that's
That's one
right.
of the breakdowns and problems of the average Black family as it is now, because you're not allowed to say anything. You have to still deal with your abusers because, God forbid, you cut off family members. That's a big no no, a taboo. It's a taboo to say, "Hey, I may forgive this person in the family that's done something, but I sure don't wanna be around them anymore."
Right.
That's another taboo because they throw in that religious, you know, aspect of, "Well, God forgives, you're supposed to forgive them." And their definition of forgiveness is totally different than this new generation. They want you to forgive and hang with them and be around them and be at the family reunions and be at the Sunday dinners with them, and it's like, "No, I'm not
Mhm.
obligated to be near an abuser."
That's right.
But that is the generation that we grew up in, unfortunately, where we're told that we have to put up with so much and they throw in the religious part. So then you start feeling, with guilt, or you may have conflicted feelings like, okay, well, am I wrong for this? Am I wrong for
Yeah.
speaking up? Am I wrong because I don't want to be around these people? So it's so many complex things. And that's why the generation after us, our kids, they do have a better position because,
Yeah.
like you said, they're better than what we were. But the sad part is, a lot of us parents, we have unwittingly thrown trauma on the kids.
Yeah.
It just was shaped differently. It was wearing a different dress, but it was just a different form of trauma. But at least some of these generational curses are being broken down sometimes more slowly, but they're being broken down because some of us are more free to speak. But, that's it's like a very lengthy conversation just about the breakdown of the Black family, the weaponization of religion and Christianity that causes so many problems. We also grew up in generations where what was therapy? What was counseling? You don't go tell somebody your business because it's
Right.
telling somebody
Tell
your business
Jesus.
if you seek help. Exactly. You're supposed to pray about it, just go to church on Sunday, and that's it. And also, what is this? People putting family secrets in books. That's a no no. Like you're not supposed to say anything. What is with you're not supposed to be having a podcast talking our business because that's what it's looked as. Like you're telling the family business instead of you're trying to heal and trying to get past it. And that's just a breakdown I feel like with families, and so many of us too have we're descendants from abuse. You know what I'm saying? There's so many. If you go back, and a lot of us, if we go back in our family trees, there's some sick abuse that took place that no one talks about. It's just an
Mhm.
absolute secret. And until you get older and you start looking at some timelines or start looking at family history, like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense, but you cannot question it. You can't ask about it, and you're looked at like you're the strange one if you start asking questions like, okay, why did this happen? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you're just not allowed to talk about it. And that's how our parents were raised and the people before them. So that's just the
Right.
complex part, of the whole generational trauma. It just gets very deep.
It does. Girl, you said so much just now, and it is so true. And they didn't have any boundaries, and they don't believe in boundaries. And my book, it does, like I do reveal some things. I think I explained some things that I wasn't willing to share before. I talk about abuse. I didn't call any names. My brothers, people do know my brothers, and I did mention that, see, things like this happens. I believe that it is my job, if it's in my face, to break a generational curse. So for years, all this abuse went on in our family. Girls were being molested. And I know where it comes from. Back in the day, you couldn't call the police. The police would kill the man. And you think about it, um, generationally, we were used as products. So you had dads that slept with their daughters to create another baby. They just put them together. They didn't see them as family. They saw them as product. So you got a father, he's gonna sleep with his daughter. They're gonna produce a child, and this child is gonna be another product. So that's how they built their um lineage of slaves then. So then as the generations came and we were free, that's kind of thing was still happening in the family. Men saw a girl or a woman they wanted, they just did that. And so it was prevalent in my family. There's so many girls that were being touched. Nobody talked about it. So when it happened to my daughter and my cousin, I took it upon myself to call the police. And of course, that that didn't really go over well, because how could you? God is no respecter of persons. We need to focus on protecting the girls instead of these men. They are grown and they know better. Even if they're my brothers, even if they're my uncles, I don't care who they are. Strangers, they need to be held accountable. We have to hold people accountable, and we have to stop hiding behind conversations. We have to stop hiding behind comfort. Like in our conversations, we just got to have the tough conversations. So sometimes I feel like I don't have the best family relationships, and sometimes I ask myself, why? Because some people would even call me a relationship expert. I'm really good with relationships. I said, but when you're the one that's doing the healing, a lot of times you'll look like the crazy one, because you ask questions that people don't feel like you should ask. I had actually had to tell one of my family members, I said, there's sugar and then there's poison. So are you telling
Mm.
me that if a family member is putting poison in my coffee, that I should still drink it because it's my family member? I said, if the sugar is going to be the sugar, the poison is going to be the poison. So I don't care who is dropping what. I'm not going to drink poison because it's my family. That doesn't make any sense to me. So when you're constantly pouring this toxic behavior out and you don't want it to be addressed, you don't want to talk about it because I'm here for getting better and growing forward. But if we want to act like
Yeah.
it's not there, I remove myself from the space because what I'm not good at these days, I spend way too much money on therapy, way too much money doing self reflections and trying to heal to sit and miss and act like it's not there. It just doesn't even make sense to me anymore. Let's discuss it. So yeah,
Mhm.
I tell a lot of stuff in my book that people the only person I was concerned about is my mom and she blessed it. So the rest of them,
Yeah.
I'm like my friend told me, she said, I just say if you don't want to be in my book, don't do anything wrong.
Mm.
Don't do
Right.
it and you won't end up in the book. So this is probably the only book that I'll write where there's all this information about, but this is my life. This is not about nobody else but me. So, I try to avoid situations where I put people out there. But girl, that's the only way we're gonna heal. You gotta heal out loud because it's really not even about you. Just be conscious about demonizing people. I try not to demonize anybody. Like my mom. She did the very best that she could with the resources that she had. She was a child trying to raise a child. And I understand that even though we don't haven't had the best adult relationship, she was my world when I was a child, when I was a teenager, even as a young adult. It wasn't until I was a young adult that I was like, you're not perfect at all. You would have thought I would have noticed that
Yeah.
a long time ago, with the decisions that she would make, but she was just everything. And, um, and I challenged her to start healing. And just a couple of years ago is when she started to really start looking at things, and, got, um, some professional help because before she just thought she would pray about it, I guess, and it would go away. But honey, at this big old age, if it hasn't gone yet, it's not going, not without your participation. So, who girl, talk about family
I'm
be like,
happy to hear that she did, but I'm happy to hear that she did get professional help because I mean, how many people of her generation have not gotten any professional help?
oh,
They
so
That's
many.
just something that's not going to happen. They're not going to speak to a professional, as you said. They're just going to go to church more. They're going to pray more, and that's it. They're not going to get any treatment, professional treatment for their trauma, the abuse they went through. They're not gonna get any help for it at
Mhm.
all. There's so many people in her generation and before then and before them, they're not gonna get any professional help. It's unheard of. Their only thing they're going to do is go to church and pray. That is it, you know. And so I do commend that she did get some help because and that's the sad part about it. At the time, you never know. No one probably even put two and two together. That's abuse because it was so commonplace
Yes.
in that generation, especially when it's happening in the church too. It's just a taboo thing that takes place that nobody talks about. So I want to ask you also about patio conversations. So I know that is something that you have done with these events, and I saw some clips of it. One of them, like I, it really made me emotional watching it, just a video, and they were carrying, like, the weight and the trauma and the
I'm
pain. Can
trying.
you tell us about Patio Conversations and just what made you decide to do this? And explain also to people who are listening or watching exactly what Patio Conversations is.
Okay, so I'll start with what you saw was my interactive book signing. Instead of just having people show up to sign books, I wanted to create something that I actually could travel with too, but it tells a story outside of the story. So it shows the weight that we all carry, and then the end of it shows the release. And that's why with that, I had a fountain for women to write down what they wanted to see disappear out of their lives. And so they would write that and watch it dissolve in the fountain. And then they would, go to the healing wall, put things on that wall that they needed to leave there. And then a journaling station, so a listening station, things that help us reflect and, you know, figure out what we are or what we want to be. Is this something you want to carry with you because this is what you want to do? Or is this something you want to leave here and try not to look back at it? Do you want to admit that it's an issue and then leave it here? And then we just had a conversation about those things because every woman I had on the panel in this area is looked at like successful, and it's like nobody knew their stories. And since I was, pretty familiar with them, I knew, their stories. And I'm like, they didn't just wake up successful. Um, One of the ladies, I was telling her, I said, the reason why you and I think are successful is because we didn't have to go through the struggle of getting out of our comfort zone because we never had one. A lot of people struggle to get out of their comfort. We didn't have those struggles. So we could just jump into things because there was no comfort. And so the reason why I decided to do patio conversations is because I realized that there are not a lot of safe spaces for us to have real conversation. You go to church groups and then there's judgment. You're met with judgment. You need to do this. You need to pray about this. You need to this. And this is not the way it's done. That's not pleasing to God. That's not. Honey, nobody wants to hear that when they're broken, when they're hurting, when they're struggling with something. And patio conversations, the way it's set up is like, say for instance, you're a host, and I really feel like this is kind of a setting where we're having this real conversation. You would be the
Right.
host. I would just show up. You would invite the women that are closest to you that you feel like in your space, y'all could have real conversations. And I would lead those conversations. And only thing I would ask is that you have an open heart today and that you will put down your defenses and trust this circle. It's hard, but we have to trust that somebody can hear our hearts without judging us. And I ask the women, I say, if you're that person that judges, I ask you not to deflect right now, because if you're judging this woman, it's because you got something going on in you and you see something in her that is reminding you of you. And so instead of dealing with you, you're going to deal with her, which we have a very, I don't know, girl, I was thinking about Beyonce when she was going through that thing and she wrote that album Lemonade. And I just could
Yeah.
not get over how many people were like talking, I can't believe she went back to Jay-Z and this and that and the other. And I was thinking, isn't this Susie who went back to Ray Ray who has nothing to offer? Like seriously, girl, Ray Ray living with his mama and can't help you out with your rent or nothing, but you deflecting and you worried about Beyonce who got whatever she got and this bad who, I mean, and they made more money off of their beef than anything. You have to sometimes wonder if it was even real because he did 44
Right.
and she did that. But that's how
Mhm.
we do. We will judge without even realizing that we're that person. Girl, that's you. You
Yeah.
just did that. So I ask, let's not do that. Let's really open our hearts and be authentic in here and say with honesty, I struggle with that too. Oh, I struggle. I'm struggling with that too. Because we have this, I will say from my perspective, for the longest, and I say I'm a recovering perfectionist because I wanted my kids to look perfect. I wanted my husband to look perfect. I wanted to look perfect. I wanted, if somebody walked in the house and something, I would flip out on everybody. If the garage was out of order and they had that door up and somebody pulled up, the UPS man or something, somebody I don't even know, I would flip out about it. Everything had to be perfect. But I realized that that's attached to not feeling enough, feeling judged, people pleasing. There's so many things attached to that. And so it's easier for me in this day and time to say, girl, I feel that instead of being like, girl, I don't know what's wrong with you. But because I would tell people what I wanted to tell me. I
Mhm.
would tell them to respond the way I wanted to respond, but didn't. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, I feel that I got the same issue. So patio conversations pretty much provides a safe space for us to deal with those specific issues and not hold back. To say,
Mm.
I am suffering right now from, you know, not feeling enough. I feel inadequate. I feel like I'm just a mom, or I feel like I'm just a wife. I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I don't feel I'm insecure. I don't feel comfortable in my skin at this point, and it causes depression. I'm overeating. Women are going through so much. And I had a client who is the most beautiful thing I've seen on social media. She posts a picture within 3 minutes, it's got like 500 likes on it or whatever. And just, I found out her boyfriend was beating her senseless. And she finally came out to talk about it. I hosted this event that I called No More Shame. And this event was private. I didn't allow them to record. 'Cause I'm like, some things have to be a sacred space. That's why that video doesn't have any talking. I don't want any audible, because I don't want women to feel like if I share this, it's got to be all over social media. You know, I don't want you to feel like I got to build my brand on your pain. So what you're saying will stay right
Yes.
here unless you have volunteered to share like what you and I are doing today. So with the No More Shame, that event, the only people that were privy to what was going on in there were the people that were in there. But she came alongside me and hosted alongside me, and she told her story. Her mom was there. Her mom was in tears, and she told her story, how she had to let her go because she kept saving her from the situation and she kept going back. But I said that to say, on social media, it looked like they were the perfect little family. They were vacationing. I didn't know she was paying for them all. He couldn't even keep a job or whatever. She was just sharing all this pain, and then he almost beat her to death. She had to escape to a neighbor's house or something. And I'm thinking, this is stuff we're ashamed to share. We don't want people to judge us, but we need each other so that we can say stuff like this. And the shame doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the person that did it. Give it back. Put it back where it belongs. This is not yours to carry. So shame on them, not shame on you. So that's what Patio Conversations is about. It's the heavy stuff.
Wow. That is something else. And, you're right, because we really do need each other, because you never know, like, will be who needs to hear your story. You never know. And I think because, we do live in a social media world where it's about the amount of likes or the amount of views or whether it goes viral. But like I've told people in the past, your purpose doesn't have to go viral because your purpose is about saving at least one person. If one person reads that book or watches that podcast or
Yeah.
looks at that post or reaches out to you, saving one life is priceless. And that's why, if God gives it to you to be able to tell your story, and the reason I say that is because not everybody can tell their story, and that's nothing wrong with them. Not everybody has to build a platform or be the next author or be the next podcaster or, be the next influencer. Like not everybody has to have that task on them. And I get that. But if you are that person that can get up and tell your story, if you are that person that can write something down on a book, because we tend to not acknowledge our gifts sometimes. Sometimes we don't realize, speaking in front of a person, that's a gift that the next person may not have. Writing something originally, no chat GPT is something that the next person may not have that gift. So if you are that person that can get up there and share your story, don't look at the quantity, look at the quality. If you're just being yourself and being authentic and telling your story, it has the power to save a life. And saving one life is it's more valuable than the number of views or all this other foolishness that, we tend to drive ourselves on in this world. It's about saving a life because you never know who's
Yeah.
listening and what they're dealing with outside of, like you said, those perfect social media posts. You don't know what a person's dealing with behind closed doors. There's some people that are struggling to even stay alive.
Yeah.
And you could be delivering a message that makes them want to live, that makes them not want to take their life, that makes them want to walk away from that abusive relationship, that makes them want to get help for that addiction or go seek therapy for the abuse that they may not even have realized they were abused because we do, sometimes people are abused and they've been gaslit, they've been mentally abused, they've been convinced that this is normal.
Yeah.
I mean, how many women have been in abusive relationships where they didn't know any better because they saw it before them? So they thought that that was a normal part of relationships to be physically or emotionally or mentally abused. They thought this was normal. So you never know what life you're going to change by sharing your story. So, never underestimate who's listening at all. And
Yes.
so, and of course, this has been just such a powerful just it's everything that you shared. And again, as I told you, our platform, it is about self-love because with everything that you've gone through, like you said, it gets to an acknowledgement no matter what you've been through, that you still are worthy, that you're still valuable, that you still deserve to receive love, and you're also capable of giving it. Sometimes if you're going through trauma, you go through a period where you don't like you said, you wonder like, "Okay, why me? Why was I the one that had to go through all these different things?" And you start to question your life, like, why are you even on this earth? You start to question your worth it as a whole, like, "Okay, why me? What is it about the abusers too that they see that they saw about me that, that
What
I
drew
was the
them?
target?" There's so many things where you right, there's so many things that you question your worth. So I wanna ask you, how do you define self-love in your life? Because to be where you are now, you got to a point where you realize, like you said, you were worthy of having a healthy marriage. You were worthy of raising your children in a loving environment. You were worthy of seeking a career. You were worthy of sharing your story with other women. So I want to ask you, how do you define self-love and what role has it played in your life?
It's so funny you're asking this because yesterday I kind of asked a similar question. Um, I feel like oftentimes, for me, the struggle was giving other people what I was giving myself. I felt like everybody else got the best of me, but when it came to me, like for instance, you're beautiful. I told you that in the beginning. And if you said something bad about yourself, oh girl, I will go in with everything I could think of about how beautiful your brows are and how beautiful your lashes are and how I like the way you and I was gonna make sure that you felt good about yourself, but then I would take that same energy and go and tear myself apart. Uh, you know,
Mm.
like everything that's not right about me. So I realized that I fed my kids healthy, but I didn't feed me healthy. I made sure I was showing up for everybody, but I wasn't showing up for myself. I would make sure that I kept my word to you, but betray myself without even blinking an eye. And like you said, I had no value for my life. I actually, was suicidal. And like you said, that one word that, it was a pastor for me that saved my life, and him saving my life, I feel like I have a responsibility because God didn't keep me here for nothing. So what self-love looks like to me now is me considering me and realizing that it's not selfish for me to consider myself first. It's actually healthy. I believe that I am important and I do play a heavy role in your life. We don't know how that is yet because I feel like everybody that encounters me, I've encountered them. So you play a heavy role in my life, whatever that looks like. My children need me, my husband need me, my brokers need me, my agents need me. But in order for me to be able to give them the best of me, I got to give me the best of me. You know, so instead of deflecting my insecurities, now I'm deflecting my self love. I'm like, this is not insecure. Yesterday, girl, I took off and I ain't had no business doing it. And I went and I had afternoon tea with my friend, and I was like, "This is self-love." So, loving myself is not, one way for me now. It's just me considering myself and understanding that I too am valuable. God made me. I'm not broken. I don't even receive that from women anymore. I used to say I'm broken, but God, still uses me. If it's broken, it can't be used anymore. So none of us are broken. We may have been bent a little bit, so I'm worthy of love. I have the ability to give it, like you said, and I serve myself so that I can serve you better. It's just I've reversed um my thinking. And instead of thinking, because we were created to be sacrificial lambs. I started telling people, I was like, Jesus already did that according to our beliefs. He already was a sacrifice. So I'm no longer sacrificing myself for those children, the husband, none of that, because I need to be Okay, for me, and I know we're running out of time, but I also want to tell you this. When you said social media, I used to have a pretty large social media presence, and then I had like a mental breakdown. And I felt like there was so much pressure attached, so many expectations attached to my presence. I'm really just now starting to come back outside is what I call it. There were so many just like I couldn't handle the expectations that came with it. And then I just decided to hang it up. And I felt like God said, girl, it's time for you to come out of there. You've been hiding long enough. I deleted my entire social media and started over. I lost a gazillion followers on Instagram. And I told Brandy, I said, I think I need to delete it and start over. She was like, no, just start building from there. But the it's for me, it's not even about that. And people tell me all the time, you could be so much bigger if you share the stuff that you're doing. And I'm like, but I don't want to expose. I want to keep some of those things sacred. I don't want to share everything because it's about that one life, like you said, not about blowing up. If that's the life God has for me, thank God. But I won't get it by, you know, sharing people's pain unless that's something they want to share. You know what I mean? This
Right.
you have an amazing purpose. I thank you for having me here and having this conversation with you. I do feel like we just had a patio conversation. And if you do want to do an
Hmm.
official one, just let me know. I'll be on a flight.
Oh, look, we definitely will be chatting after this. And even before, like when Brandy gave me, your information and I read through it, and I was like, yeah, of course, and automatically was like, well, she definitely needs to come through our Pink Rain group. And I know anybody that's listening probably, what are they talking about? But so with Go Queen, we have our Pink Rain community that I started in February. So we have these chats every other Saturday morning, no cameras. That's one of the main important things. Like, don't turn the camera on because it's to feel comfortable. So you don't have to get up and feel like you got to beat your face, do your hair,
Yeah,
brush your teeth, whatever. Just get out. You can just relax. You can lay down or on the phone. It's just for us
yeah,
to unpack, celebrate each other because like you said, we put so many things on the back burner for somebody else, especially you become a mother. Like we'll be dead last, and even like now, even for myself personally, and I could be rambling, but just like I'll get compliments about my appearance, but that stems from being a teased child, being told I was ugly, being told I wasn't pretty, even having an ex spouse that, made it his mission to like whatever I liked he hated. Whatever I thought was great, he did everything he could to just make it seem like I just wasn't on the right side of anything, So there's so many things behind what we see, like everybody has a story that some people just, you'll never know
that's right.
unless you share it. So that's the beauty of Pink Rain. And like I said, we'll definitely link up for that. And I definitely would love to talk to you about patio conversations because again, I feel like building community for women is something that is needed. And I know like there's a lot of controversy behind women's empowerment groups. I came across a TikTok. I come across it all the time. People are like, oh, I hate those empowerment groups, those brunches is fake. It's what you bring to it. But you have to still seek your tribe because for every empowerment group that may not be genuine, there are groups of women who are gathering, who are the exact opposite, who are genuine, who are on a mission of healing, who are not coming in with any type of negative, energy. And that's always a needed thing. So again, I guess I can go on and on, but I have definitely appreciate this conversation. And this conversation too is just another example why it's important to just talk sometimes and to just share what is going on. Just like I told you before we hit record, I'm like, just relax, be comfortable
Yeah,
because we're talking. When you just start, when people gather to talk and not put on a show or just, overthink, just relax. You never know, again, what life you're going to save,
that's right.
what you're going to share that's going to make people think. A lot of times we don't have enough conversations just about the generational trauma and the weaponization of religion that's tied into that. That's a conversation that I feel like we need to have more conversations in our community because a lot of people are suffering because of the way religion has been weaponized to make you throw abuse in the closet, act like it never happened, or not get treatment for your depression, or not even hold abusers accountable. Because,
Yeah.
there's some environments where it's like, oh, just pray for the abuser.
Ah,
No, I'm gonna press charges. Like,
that's
that's what
right.
we need to do. So there's so many things that we definitely need to talk about more. So like I said, I can go on and on, but before we end everything, please tell everybody how they can find you, how they can order this book, tell them about your websites. And I know you said you're easing back into social media, but if you'd like to share your social medias, give everybody your contact information.
Okay, my website is www.lookbackforwhat.com. You can get my book on there. It's available on Amazon. It's available on eBay, barnesandnoble.com. Like really, you can find it on a lot of different platforms currently. On Instagram, I am the Elevated Coach. Same on Facebook, and Telesa Wright, my first and last name on Facebook. And I think that's it for now. I'm on TikTok.
Drop it. I make sure I publish everything. But again, thank you so much for sharing your story. As I said, these conversations, I know it's rough to talk about some of these things, but again, if God gives it to you to share it, you never know who you're going to save just by sharing your story, or who's going to look at something differently by listening to what you have shared. So thank you again for just this book, the things that you're doing. We'll definitely have to chat again. Like, I know it's not easy, but I just appreciate you and women like you that share their stories, because it's not easy for all of us that are trauma survivors. Because I don't use the term victim, but who are trauma survivors, who we're getting up every morning and we're trying to help somebody and also heal. It's a lot of work. So
Yeah,
I definitely appreciate you for sure. And for anybody that tunes in, that listens, just remember that in spite of what you've gone through, a lot of us have gone through things that at the time we didn't have the control over it. We weren't able to defend ourselves, which of course is an unfair hand. But right now, where you're sitting at right now and this day in time, you do have the power now. You do have the control. You don't have to be anybody's victim. You don't have to live in sadness. You don't have to live in pain. You don't have to live in trauma. You are worthy. You are valuable, and you deserve to live a blessed life. You deserve to live a happy life. You deserve healthy relationships, healthy friendships. You deserve wealth. And don't let the past define you at all. So I just hope that anybody that tunes in just understands that you don't have to let that trauma drive your life. Like, you can take over and live the life that you deserve. So I just pray that, through this conversation, if someone finds a way that they can get closer to healing. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Miss Telesa Wright. This has been an amazing conversation. And please go ahead and check out her book, Look Back for What. And make sure you guys, like I said, whatever you have to do so that you're not looking back anymore, you can move forward. So thank you again for joining the Q Chat. You can catch this conversation and more www.goqueen.com. Make sure you guys be safe and go love yourself.
She's a queen.